Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in to Fishing for Men, a podcast for men who are interested in learning how to drop their nets and walk with Jesus. We're just a group of normal guys talking about our own walks in faith and hoping you might find something you can relate to as well. Everything you hear when you tune in will be grounded into the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 4, verses 19 through 20, which reads, "And he said to them, 'Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men.' Immediately they left their nets and followed him."
For tonight, the folks that are joining us are myself, Billy Bernhardt. I'll be the host, and the co-hosts we have tonight with us are...
Hey, it's Cole Van Tiger.
Brandon Clay here.
Spencer.
And Mike.
Awesome. Today we're going to be talking about fatherhood and what this means as a part of our identity. If you've been following along with us, first we started out with our identity in Christ. Then we talked about our identity as a husband. And so we're going to continue with that today, and we're going to start with a story from our common denominator, Mike, and his story about fatherhood from this week.
Well, I've got a lot of stories. How long do we have? So just a little background, I've got a 16-year-old, be 17 this year. I've got a 12-year-old, a boy, 16, and a 12-year-old girl. So right now, I guess I should call it my challenge with my son is that there's something that I expect from him that he's not reciprocating. So it really bugs the crap out of me when, like simple things, like just I don't know, maybe it's a cultural thing for me. Growing up in Asia, when you see an older person in the house, you actually greet them. So if I see my grandpa, my aunt, my uncle, I would greet each and every one of them separately. I don't just say, "Hey everybody." Mm-mm. So when we go to my in-laws, when we leave, I'll tell the kids, "Hey, go say bye to everybody," and they would walk around the house, look for every single person that are older than them, and says, "See you, uncle, see you, aunt, see you, grandpa, see you, grandma." So it's that, so I'm trying to keep that culture in him. I mean, it's a sign of respect. But recently, we went to the lake and came back, and I haven't seen him in like 2 days. So we went to lunch. He walked into the restaurant. The four of us were sitting down, and he has his phone out. And I was talking to him, asking him a question, and he didn't even realize I was talking to him. And it was just like, couple of, not even 2 feet next to me. He was sitting there, and he didn't even know that I was talking to him. And I've always told him, when we're at the dinner table, when we're eating, don't be on your phone. Because, I just want to have a relationship, talk, and just talk, right? I mean, just to get to know each other, talk, and see how their days are. But I snapped, and I was like, I kind of told him, I'm kind of, effing pissed at you right now. That's what I said. And my wife was kind of startled.
A little taken back.
Yeah. And then my son was like startled too, and so he put his phone down on the table. But you can see his face was like, I'm putting my phone down, but whatever, that attitude. Then I said to him, I says, I'm looking at your face right now, and it's not a face that I want to see, so you can put your face back on the phone. Because I was that pissed, and I didn't talk to him for the rest of the day. I didn't talk to him. Today's Wednesday. Yeah, I haven't talked to him in 2 days. It's only like on a need to talk basis with him right now. But it's just, I really feel that I felt like he was disrespecting me, right? But I think when I look back, I was like, okay, it was not, I could have done better. So, yeah, I think Cole mentioned it in the last episode about, like words, you had to eat your words, remember that? And I was just thinking back to that. It's like, yeah, that's kind of, I have to eat my words on that because, I wasn't using appropriate language. 2, I wasn't really showing grace. I could have said something nicer and say, "Hey, could you put your phone down and let's have a conversation?"
Yeah.
So, Spencer, don't do what I do.
No, dude, Mike, I think if I could offer any advice, and I know you've got older kids, so it's hard for me to do that because my kids are a little bit younger. I've got 2 daughters, 10 and 8. But anytime that we think we made a mistake, or anytime we punish the girls, really, we have a sit down after. Sometimes it's right after, and we say, "This is the first time we're doing this, and this is the first time you're doing this. We're learning here together. We're doing this day by day, minute by minute. We don't know what's right or wrong." And that really gets their buy-in. That really shows that we're all on the even playing field, essentially. But at the end, they still know who has the authority in the house. So if I could offer any advice, that's something that my wife and I really instill in our kids when we have tough times.
Well, I honestly, today I was thinking of sending him a text because I don't really want to talk to him right now, but I do feel like I want to send him a text and explain why I was so pissed at him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because that he's on the phone, but I think for me, and this might be my issue, is that sometimes I feel like people don't respect. When I feel like I'm not respected, then I kind of that's like my trigger point. Because to me, it's like respect is a important thing for me, right? Like I respect everybody, and I expect the same thing back as well. So with him, it's like a lot of time I'll tell him, "Hey, don't eat and watch your phone," and he'll say, "Well, but I'm sitting here eating by myself." I'm like, "Okay, but if you don't watch something, you will eat faster, get it done, and get on with your life." But he doesn't understand that. So he does it. So to me, when he sits there and eat and watch whatever on his phone, I felt like he was disrespecting me, right? And of course, now my 12-year-old is learning from him. So I had to kind of put a screen time back on her phone. And I'm thinking I want to put it on him, but I felt like because he's 16, I don't want to do that because it's kind of like, punishing a 21-year-old. I'm like, come on. That's why I was like, I want him to have that freedom. And I've always told him, I said, hey, with freedom comes responsibility.
Yeah.
So that's where I am. It's like, wish I could beat that into him.
Yeah, there's always an opportunity for that. I think for those, obviously the listeners out there, we've got 4 kids under 6, 2, 4, 6, and about to be 7. So not under 6 now. She'll be 7 in a couple of weeks. And so one of the things we've kind of worked through too is and learned, because 2 of our kiddos are foster kids, is that kids actually enjoy some of that structure and boundary.
Oh yeah, definitely.
They need to learn how to create those boundaries, and sometimes they need parents to put those in front of them first, so they learn what boundaries are, because if you give them too much freedom, they actually don't know what to do with it. And so creating those boundaries for your son, even at 16, might actually be a good thing. So, but I really appreciate you sharing that story, Mike, and being vulnerable to all the listeners out there. For the rest of the guys that were here, who else is fathers in the group? We heard from Mike and Cole, and obviously just from me. But what about Brandon and Spencer?
Brandon here. I've got a 17-year-old son, about to be 18, graduating from high school, and a 14-year-old daughter. So 2 high schoolers.
I bring a lot of experience as a dual income, no kids.
Yeah.
The dink.
Also known as the dink. So Spencer's taking in all the wisdom from us tonight and gonna share whatever he can gather.
Mainly the don'ts.
Yeah, exactly. Hey guys, don't do that.
All right, dink. Listen to this.
But I think we can all relate to Mike's story. I know I can, even with kids who are 7 years old and even less than that, of the things that frustrate us. And sometimes, I think you said it right at the beginning, is we set expectations of what they should be, and then when they aren't that, and maybe we haven't even conveyed those expectations, that then we get frustrated and we're like, why aren't you doing what I expected you to do? But maybe we also haven't conveyed that either. So regardless of like the model, that you had or didn't grow up in, I think we can all relate to the story that you had, and or to one of the, there's all kinds of examples of fathers in the media. Maybe you had a good experience with your dad growing up, maybe you didn't. But at the end of the day, I think Scripture does a really good job, and ultimately, God is, called our Father in the Bible, and so He's the best example that we have of what it looks like to be a good father to our kiddos. And so I'm sure we will all talk about in this episode how we've messed our kids up. I'm already sending mine to counseling, so I know I've already done a good job on them on messing them up. So we'll continue to work through that. But at the end of the day, the vision that we want to uphold as fathers can be boiled down to in three core beliefs that we're going to talk about tonight. And it's really just important to ground ourselves in them, because in doing so, we'll ensure that we're aligned with Christ and our call to lead our families really well. And so the first one that we're going to jump into is leading our family and being that role model. And so the first scripture that I want to jump into is Deuteronomy 6, 5 through 9.
Everyone's favorite book of the Bible.
Yeah, it's so fun to kind of read through these
when they're struggling to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. So it starts off, it says, and this is one of the things it's called the great Shema. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your might. These words which I have commanded to you shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. So, the question that I have for all of you is, how do we teach our kids to love the Lord with all of our heart, soul, and strength?
By modeling it.
What does that look like, Brandon?
That's a tough question. I mean,
ain't probably a loaded one.
Yeah. The quick, simple sounding answer is to live life out like Christ. Doing that on a day-to-day basis is not easy. I think one important thing about the story that Mike shared is that being a parent isn't a one-way street where you're just downloading stuff into your kids. There's interactions back and forth. So while you're trying to feed in them and help them to grow to be a good person who loves God, we as fathers are also challenged at the same time by those interactions with them. How Mike said, I look back and maybe I should have done things differently. So, and I have hundreds of stories just like that too, where I've looked back and been like, oh, why did I do that? And not only once, I do the same thing multiple times. So trying to not just tell them what to do, but to live it out myself.
Yeah.
Do you feel like sometimes when you get mad at your son or your daughter, that later on when you process it, you think and you're like, man, I wish I had someone when I was your age was trying to help me to be better. Because I think for me, the reason I kind of blew up is because I look back and I was like, my dad wasn't perfect, but he was a provider, right? So I have never had, so growing up, just so y'all know, growing up in Asia, in the Asian culture, dad's always out working, right? Trying to be that provider, financial provider. So we never had a day that we would sit down and talk. Honestly, I've never talked to my dad until I'm like maybe 30. Now I call him and we talk because he's not working anymore. But to me, I was like, and my wife and I kind of agree that, our kids have loving parents that are trying to coach them, mentor them, but they don't seem like they they get it or they want to get it. But then I think to myself, well, they're 16 and 12. When I was 16, I'd probably do the same thing. I probably won't listen to my parents too. So now I'm kind of like, I think I'm more disappointed more than I'm angry because he didn't, or I guess I'm more disappointed that he doesn't get it. Like, there's somebody that's trying to help you, but you're not appreciating, you're not putting effort in. That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true for you, but I felt the same thing with my own dad. I mean, he was there, he loved me, he was present. But I look back and think, was he as involved as he could have been? One thing that I've heard in going to counseling myself is that part of it is just it's a different generation. And in your case, there's a bit of a cultural aspect to it too, right? You carry a lot of, that Chinese, Malaysian culture over and try to carry it on with your family, but there's also been a lot of American influence on your life too, right? So it's kind of a mixture of those two, I'd imagine. So you've got somewhat of a cultural difference, and you also have a generational difference. And I kind of think of it as like, the whole pendulum, like, I think I didn't get this from my parents, so I need to provide it to my kid, and I might overcompensate. And then from their perspective, they could be like, I wish my parents would just give me some space. Like, I don't need all of this, you know what I mean? So that's a tough one. But yeah, I think that too, like, well, my parents didn't do this for me and I'm doing it for my kids. How come they're not grateful? But
Yeah.
It's tough to know their perspective on the situation.
I think so much of it, and they talk about this, as we were going through a lot of our training, as we were becoming foster parents, and we've all heard this phrase is more is caught than taught.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so that's, as we were kind of working through this episode, I had started with just leading the family, and over the last couple of days, I added the role model piece, because I think in a way that you lead your family starts with how you role model that to your family. And so, like, an example of this is, I do my quiet time in the mornings, and I'm sitting at my desk with my Bible open, doing my Bible study, and basically ever since we've been in our house, my kids would come in the morning and they would see me. They would quote unquote catch me reading the Bible. And if you, every once in a while now, you'll find my son walking around the house with his little picture Bible. He's just walking around with it open. And I'm like, what are you doing, bud? He's like, I'm reading the Bible.
That's awesome.
My daughter cannot go to sleep if I do not read the Bible to her first. She will not go to sleep. Like, she'll throw a fit. And even, Charlotte has seen me bring my Bible to church. And so she'll bring a notebook with her. And she's like, I want to take my own notes. And so I think a lot of it starts with how we structure some of our day around our house to allow our kids to see us doing some of those things to intentionally spend time with God. Do you have some thoughts on that, Spencer?
Yeah, I think, it makes me think of we hear all the time that phrase, the eye is the best teacher, not our words. Because in my experience growing up, it was actually the opposite. I grew up in the Catholic faith tradition, and we would go to church, but, it was always okay, we're going to leave after communion so that we can beat traffic, or we got to go to brunch. And so you start to learn, like, okay, you go to church, it's part of it, it's like, it's that, but it was, you follow dad out, and you didn't do the pew, you did the awkward, just like keep walking past everybody right out to the car so that you could get to IHOP first.
Yeah.
But that influences and informs kind of that perception around faith of God is important, beating traffic is just as. To not finish, it's just super interesting.
I remember I remember growing up and sitting in the church service with my dad, and I would see my mom, who's very into the worship. My dad, not so much. Yeah. Maybe his mouth would move a little bit, maybe they wouldn't, and so I carried that with me for a long time of just sit here, like you just kind of stand. I think if any of you guys have seen me now, that is not how I worship. But what's weird is I can remember in those times that I wanted to, but I saw this role model that wasn't doing that. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not supposed to do that. I'll just keep my hands down and keep my mouth shut. And so what's interesting now is he's come to Hope a few times, and I've looked over him, and he's had his hands up, which is just
Wow.
really
That's
awesome to watch
Crazy.
my dad do that. But I still remember that of those things. It's nothing he ever said to me, but it's what I saw of, okay, maybe I'm not supposed to actually do that.
I've had similar experiences you though with my kids, especially the last 7 months when I started praying with them at night, bringing my Bible to church, doing those things. They'll each now take 10 to 15 minutes to write a prayer down, not just speak it, but they both write a prayer down. Just gives me chills thinking about it. It's true. The eye is the best teacher. I like that saying. It's good.
But go ahead. It's interesting that none of what I hear you all saying, again, coming from a guy who doesn't have a lot of experience, but it doesn't sound like these are earth-shattering things that you're doing to be that role model.
Not at all.
It might have taken a lot to get over it, psychologically, emotionally, for you to be in that space, but the impact it's having is huge.
It's all about intentionality.
I was so nervous to start it. Yeah. The prayers at night, I was nervous to pray with my, at the time, 9 and 7-year-old. Like, why would me at 38 be afraid to pray with my 9 and 7-year-olds? I shouldn't be. But just being vulnerable with them, and they just caught on. Like you said, it's simple. It's so simple.
Well, I have a question for you guys. I know one of the reasons why I struggle with modeling over, telling is because telling is like direct, and it seems like, at least in my mind, that's going to be the quickest way to get the result I want. Whereas modeling it, being a role model, is more of an indirect route.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think is cool, what I'm hearing from you guys is like, Billy, when you started reading the Bible in the morning, you didn't think, okay, I'm going to go read my Bible in the morning so that...
at this specific time, so my kids can catch me.
See it. And so that...
that wasn't my intention.
So that I'll somehow get them to read the Bible too.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? When we're doing those healthy things, that's just kind of the natural result. When you opened up and were vulnerable, Cole, eventually your girls just saw that and wanted to do the same thing.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I think it's all about just the intentionality. Make sure your heart's in the right posture before you start any of that stuff. Because I think we heard it from a message at church a couple weeks ago, which was real change takes time. And so if we want to see that change in our kids, telling them the quickest result, like you mentioned, probably isn't going to get it done. No. So awesome. Well, as we move on to the next one, which is meeting the needs of the family. And we've talked about this, and it's been mentioned a couple of times so far, of dad as the provider. I think that is the common expectation of the father. Maybe it's changing in our culture today a little bit, but I think for fathers, there's also this emotional and spiritual needs that need to be met. And so James 1:19 says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. Psalms 103:13 talks about how a father has compassion just like God our Father has compassion on us. And then Colossians 3:21 says, it says exasperate, or what that means is don't intensely frustrate your children. And you're like, oh man, I'm pretty sure I do that a lot.
And Mike's like, it's the other way around, Dave.
Yeah.
They need to read that. We need to change that scriptures. Son, don't piss off your father.
It is. It's called kids, honor your father and mother. But I want to tell a story, and I might get emotional telling this, but this is a story from one of our foster meetings that, man, it hits this point so hard. There's this girl that came into care, and there's a guy who's telling this story. He's been fostering kiddos and working with at-risk kids for like 42 years. He was working in a home, and this girl came. She was pretty standoffish for most of the time. She smoked marijuana, he goes, as much as she could possibly get. Any place, anywhere, she would go grab it. Didn't really care about school. He caught her in the act behind a portable, like literally watched her do it. And he's like, what are you doing? And she goes, I forgot his name, Mr. Whatever. If you don't know what I'm doing, I feel sorry for you. That was her words back to him. And she was, I think she was in high school, like freshman or sophomore, so she's still pretty young. But he said that she would always sit on the front porch, and she would wait for her dad or mom to come see her for her visit, and it didn't happen very often. And so one day he sat out there with her, and he was just talking to her about it, and he's like, something to the effect of like, what are you looking for, like, in a dad and that kind of stuff. She's like, Mr. whatever his name was, I think the role of the father is to give little girls their wings. He says, she's like, little girls are these angels that are on earth and they don't have their wings, and it's the father's job to give them. And she's like, my dad doesn't ever show up, so I'm just never going to get mine. And that's okay. And so at the end, fast forward at the end of the school year, they all get to play a song of pretty much whatever you want. He goes, boy, have we heard some songs coming playing down this, and it's blaring through the whole campus. And she got to pick her song, and they get to walk up to this staircase that goes to basically nothing. They closed it off, and she gets to start up there, and she asked him, she's like, can you walk me down the stairs and walk me out, as her song was playing. And he was like, yeah, sure, I'm happy to do that. They got up to the stairs, her song was playing, she walks down the stairs, and every teacher and kid in the school is lined with this hallway with little wings.
Oh.
Yeah, and they walked them down the aisle, and they all handed her wings as she walked out. And I was like, man, like, yeah. It seems like such a small thing for her, but man, did that man meet some needs of that child that she needed. She's now, I think, like a kindergarten teacher. She's married. She's got 2 or 3 kids. She's doing fantastic. Like, I can only imagine the impact that a moment like that seems pretty simple, would have on a girl like that. And so I always think about that. And that story will never leave my mind, of what it looks like for really anybody, but for dads to be able to meet the needs of their kiddos. And so the question I have for you guys is, how can we as dads be quick to listen, but when we do speak, because I think there is a time for that, when we do speak, how do we speak in a way that uplifts and blesses our children rather than tear them down?
So I guess I have a story to go with this. It was a couple weeks ago. I had to drive my oldest to soccer practice about an hour away down in Dallas. And it was a simple question. I just try to have, like the question asked, quick to listen. I just try to ask a simple question that just gets her going. And it was literally an hour, her talking about her and her friends and any kind of drama that they may be having. Any kind of, boy issues in 4th grade. I cannot believe it, but there's boy issues already. But just listening to her and providing little inches of feedback here and there got us that much more connected. I think that really is a great way to handle it, in my opinion. But that's just an example.
Well, I think you've talked to us about this, and you may have been talking to us about this earlier this morning, actually. Yeah, you talked about taking your girls on dates and teaching them how they should be treated as women when they get older.
Right.
Because if you don't, who the heck is going to teach them those things? And they're just going to learn after a day after day after day.
Or they're going to learn from the Hollywood people.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Movie star, whatever.
Yeah, I try to do quarterly dates with each of them. It doesn't look how I want it to look every time. I don't show up at the front door and walk into my truck and this and that. But I do take them to dinner, or take them to a movie, do something that just shows them how much they mean to me just as much as I mean to them.
So yeah. I'm curious, how many of you guys grew up with a dad that's provided emotional support? Financial, we know, because they're probably out there working, paying for stuff. But emotional and being there whenever you need them. It's like, have you guys?
My dad was always there if I wanted to talk to him, but it typically wasn't an initiation of hey, how's life going?
Yeah.
If it was tied to sports, like if I was upset or something like that, he would work to calm me down from those types of things. But like, hey, how's your walk with Jesus going? That wasn't coming out of his mouth. And again, I think we talked about this too. It was a generational thing. I remember not getting a hug from my grandfather, I think, until I was a teenager. Like that, showing emotion man to man just was not a thing. And so all of my emotional support came from my mom. And so I gravitated an attachment towards women. Not that as a man, I needed that any more than I got from that. But I didn't get that very much. And I think me and my dad probably still have a little bit of a challenge of having that type of discussion.
Yeah. Mine was very similar. However, I'll admit it, even up to I think I graduated high school, I'd still give my dad a kiss goodnight. That's just something that was embedded in me, I guess, and something I do with my girls. But yeah. that relationship, I could go on for hours. It'd have to be a whole nother podcast in its own, where you just ask me questions about my childhood. But yeah, it was similar. I would have to bring up the topic for it to be something that we discussed. It was never asked.
What about you guys, Spencer?
I wouldn't say I did. It's interesting because my parents were divorced and my mom had 70% custody. So I didn't get to see my dad a ton. But I also think, hey, even if that had been different, I probably wouldn't have. This conversation makes me think of John Eldridge's book, Wild at Heart. I don't know if y'all have read that, but he talks about everybody has a wound from their father. Mm-hmm. And that's because their father had a wound from their father.
Yeah.
And as as I think about this, it's just, I think some of that is how can we be slow to anger? Maybe it's just thinking and being aware of what is it how did you get it?
What is our pain?
Yeah. What is your pain?
We're listening to a prayer podcast, and it was actually talking about how pain that is not transformed by God is transmitted.
Yeah.
And so it first starts with the self-awareness of what is that pain or challenge or issue, whatever that is that was passed down. It's got to be identified so that you can that God can then transform it. You've got to surrender it first, and then God can transform it so it doesn't get transmitted to your children.
Yeah. What was your experience, Brandon?
My dad was and really still is pretty stoic. He's there. He's very faithful in the sense that he'll always be there if you need him to, but not the best at verbalizing it. So I don't think I realized it as a kid. I look back and just thought, oh, my dad was always there. But in other ways, kind of similar to Billy, I latched onto my mom more because she provided that emotional support that I needed.
Yeah, it's funny when Billy asked about how we serve our kids. I saw this video on whatever shorts, and it was this Asian guy talking to getting interviewed by another person, and he was saying that the way that Asian parents show love to the kids is to make a lot of money for them, to buy them things, to save for them, to make sure that their kids have a house, have a car, have buying all these things. And I look back and I was like, yeah, it's kind of true, because my dad, he pretty much saved up a lot of money for me to come to America, and he never bought anything for himself. But I also look back and I can't remember a day that we sit down and talk, like growing up as a teenager. Never gave me a hug, never said I love you, never said I'm proud of you. And I don't know, maybe it's because it's not in the language, which it's kind of weird. So now I'm trying. I look back at that, and I'm doing the opposite, which now I'm trying to spend as much time. Maybe that's why I'm pissed at him, because he doesn't want to spend time.
Maybe that is it. Maybe you're identifying that wound, and you're like, hey, I'm trying to make you not have this wound, but you don't recognize that I'm trying to make you not have this wound.
It's funny you mentioned it, because this afternoon when I was home by myself, I was just thinking, I was like, okay, we're gonna talk about father, being a dad tonight, and it came in through my head. It's like, I am trying to be not like my dad
Mm-hmm.
to my kids. I'm trying to be different, right? Telling them I love them, proud of them, trying to spend as much time as I can.
Yeah.
But I'm not seeing that reciprocated.
Yeah.
So I think as all of us as kids, I know I did this for sure. I would always say, I'm not going to do that when I'm a parent. I'm not going to do that when I'm a parent, etc. But as a parent now, I don't know if I have those same thoughts. I definitely learned so much from my dad. I learned how to, sheetrock. I learned how to change tires. I learned all of the man things, using power drills, hammers, all that stuff. So I learned a ton from him, and I learned a lot what not to do. And I don't want to see that come across bad, but I don't dwell on that stuff. I don't know if that comes across right or not, but there's definitely lessons learned, but I also don't think about it all the time when I'm parenting my kids.
Cole, you said something a second ago. As I listen to all of you, the theme that I hear is curiosity. What you try and do with your girls is lean in with curiosity. I think as the listeners, it just seems like, I hear you, Billy, and you said, my dad never asked me these questions. And had they just leaned in with curiosity, Mike, had they leaned in with curiosity. And Brandon, even you said earlier, sometimes we're quick to give advice or maybe just shoot something at you as a father because it's the fastest way and it's the easiest way for me. But if I were to lean in with curiosity instead of diverting to anger, it's the harder, more indirect way. But that's what I hear you all saying.
Yep.
Again, based on my 0 years of experience.
You're going to be such a great
Yeah. Yeah, it's instead of, hey, don't do that, do this, it's, hey, why did you do that?
Yeah. In a non-rhetorical way.
Yeah.
Truly curious.
Hey, I'm like, help me understand, kind of thing. And that process will take longer, just by nature. So we have definitely beaten that one quite a bit, but I think it's an important one, that the fathers play such an important role in meeting the needs of our kiddos, both physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And then the last one we have for tonight is to be a servant. While we are to lead, which we talked about at the beginning, I also thought it would be important for us to talk about how to be a servant, because at the end of the day, we are to also serve our families well, and also teach them how to serve other people. And so the verses that we had here, I'm going to call an audible because what's on our notes, I didn't like that one, so I'm changing to Mark 10:45. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. And one of the passages we talked about last week was in Ephesians about how we're supposed to serve our wives through displaying how Jesus served the church. And I think that still applies to us as dads too, is how do we lay down our life for the interest of our kiddos and serve them while also being able to lead them well. And I think me and Brandon talk about this a lot. There's always two ends of the spectrum, and how do we sort of meet that tension in the middle of teaching our kids but also serving them at the same time. And so I guess the question I have out of this one is, how can we show our children how to serve others but also even how to serve them? Because that feels weird. I'm the parent.
I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, just leading by example. Like what the eye sees, right? Opening doors for people.
I think
serving
sometimes
shelters.
Sometimes reminding them too, right? Like I make my kids. So I don't know if you saw my Facebook post. I got rid of the dishwasher. I got rid of the garbage disposal. Not that garbage disposal does anything.
So you're replacing all of your
appliances
with kids?
Yep. So here's the reason why. And I think that it's more to show them that, hey, you live in the house, but you don't get to stay for free.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta contribute, right, to the family. Do something.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I'm cooking, I would ask my daughter and say, hey, come and taste test. And then I would say, hey, could you put all these things back? So she'll put, salt, sugar, whatever, all back in the pantry. And then when I'm done, I would tell the kids to, hey, make sure y'all wash and then my wife would come back and says, make sure you wash and dry and put them away right away. So I don't feel like we're making them work. I mean, it's nice for them to see that we do it, but I think sometimes you have to make them work. Do the work and make them understand that, hey, I cook, you all wash. So it's part of teaching them that you have to contribute to the society, right? Because we all live together. You don't just get to live, eat, and go play your games just because you're kids.
Yeah.
I mean, at age appropriate for sure. When they were younger, they used to put their laundry. So we don't have laundry baskets in our closet. Every night they will take their dirty clothes into the laundry room, and we have a basket there. But then when they were younger, I still remember so cute. My son was probably about 5 or 6, and he was trying to reach into the washing machine, and it was a top loader, so he pretty much had half his body in the washing machine with his feet dangling out trying to pick something out. And I think that was so funny because I told him, hey, go put that in the dryer. So ever since they were young, I've started telling them, hey, you got to do this, got to do this. And I think it is nice to show them, but I think it's also, as a parent, we also need to have them, we kind of have to guide them, like, hey, this is what you need to do.
Yeah, and like we all work together as a unit kind of thing.
Yeah. And we even talk to my son now about, hey, when you start to date somebody, you have to know who that person is, because that's going to be your, possibly going to be your lifelong partner, and make sure that, y'all can work together, right? So if he doesn't start at home working together with mom and dad, how is he going to be able to work together with friends or, his significant others?
That's an interesting perspective. And I heard you ask that question, that like, it's almost like you're saying accountability as a form of serving your family, and that's just not a framework that I would think of. So it's interesting to hear you say that, because I think of, like, what am I doing that's self-sacrificing as a form of service? I don't know about you all, but so I appreciate that perspective, Mike, because that's not a way that I would have interpreted that question. It's very interesting.
I think when we talk about serving others, we're always thinking, oh, what am I doing for others, right? Mm-hmm. So that they don't have to do it. But I think sometimes it's teaching them. That's a serving. Mm-hmm. That's teaching them how to be a man, right? Like Cole was saying, opening doors, things like that.
Now that you say that, I think inadvertently that's what happened to me. I didn't have a dishwasher growing up. My brother and I were every night standing at the sink doing dishes by hand. But let me go further. Now, as a husband and as a father, when I go to my in-laws, I'm the first one at that sink cleaning up after everybody's done with dinner. Like, they're still sitting down chatting. Not all of them. Some will help and get up and help and clean the table. But me or Debbie, my wife, are one of the first ones up at that sink cleaning and serving.
Yeah, it's kind of ingrained in your.
It's ingrained in my
lifestyle.
It is for sure.
But in a way, you're also demonstrating service because
sure.
You're up, and maybe your kids see that.
They do,
and I think that's an awesome opportunity for them to see you do that. I think one of the easiest ways, I think, for me is whenever I don't feel like doing something, mm-hmm. Like maybe it's been a long day after work. I just want to sit down or do something else besides go run around with, a bunch of little children, 4 of them. But those times where maybe I, begrudgingly do it, we got to work on the begrudgingly part, but actually going to just go do that for a little bit. Spending time with them, I think, can go a long way, even if it's just for a little bit. And showing them that I'm not just going to get off work and just be the provider and then to plop down on the couch and watch a TV show or something that.
I'm gonna take it another level. You said begrudgingly, so Spencer, don't do this when you have kids. Because there's one day I remember I was so tired of all the stuff that's in the sink and nobody was helping, and I kind of blurted out. I was like, I work all day and I come home and I cook and y'all eat and this is all on there. So, yeah, I kind of blew a gasket on that. I still did it begrudgingly, but then I also blew a gasket, so don't do that to me.
Noted.
So on the other flip side of that question, how do you like show your kids how to serve others, or how do you go do that as a family?
I think I mentioned like serving, and this is something we don't do regularly, which we need to. Serving like soup kitchens or I always make the made the comment to my girls a few times. We need to just go get a bunch of double cheeseburgers and drive down downtown Dallas and start handing them out to the homeless. So it's that way that I can think of off the top of my head.
It's those little things. I think making a bunch of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and hopping in the car and just going to hand them out.
Try not to eat them before you get there.
Because our kids will always be brutally honest. At least my daughter is. Of, hey, why don't you stop on the side of the road and help that person? I'm like,
yeah.
You caught that way faster than I did. But that's how they think. And as you pass by, they see you pass by over and over and over again.
Yeah, I would say if you're going to do anything with the family, like as a family project, do it from young, where they can remember. Like my daughter loves doing those meal packing. Every year, she and I will go and do it. And my other two family members don't really want to, so I got to work on them on that. Or I may have to force them to go do that.
Maybe ask him another way he wants to serve with the family.
Yeah.
Remember, they're not talking right now, Cole.
Oh yeah.
It seems like it has to be such like a sliding scale of what does service to others look like, because I watch my sister and brother-in-law, and if they're going to try and serve on a weekend, good luck with sports.
Yeah.
I mean, a basketball tournament that is Friday afternoon through Sunday afternoon. Like, when are you going? And you got to be at a gym at 7 a.m. And you're like, it just seems like in today, it's like you have to figure out how you're going to make it a priority.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like you have to even then brace for the impact of you're doing something that, kingdom righteous work, but you're probably going to catch so much crap for that.
Oh, you will.
From parents of a team, like,
oh yeah.
You're really going to miss the championship game because you're going to church.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy. It just seems like it's so hard that you're pitted against.
Oh yeah.
Stuff like that.
It's funny you brought that up, and since we're talking about like serving and church and all that stuff, but sometimes we were thinking like you can still serve even with your teammates. Because I can guarantee you there'll be somebody that forgot something, there's somebody that needed something, and that's how you start showing your kids, like, hey, you can help your teammate.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, my girls carry extra shin guards in their soccer bag in case their teammates forgot them.
Yeah.
And that's and extra socks just in case, stuff like that. That is a good point, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, there's always an opportunity to serve, no matter what environment you're in. And teaching our kids that from a young age, I think, is super critical, and we also got to role model that as dads for sure. So, everyone, we just want to say thank you for joining us tonight with this framework in mind. If you're a dad right now, think through some of these topics. Give yourself a grade from 1 to 10. How are you leading? How are you meeting the needs of your family and your kiddos? And how are you teaching them to serve, but also serving them? And also, we talked about this, or I did, how are you doing it? What is your heart posture towards that? Do you find joy in doing that? Are you resentful? Are you doing it begrudgingly like I do? But think through that and then maybe dig a little deeper. Why do you feel that way?
Yeah, and if you feel like sharing the grade and some feelings, please leave that in the comments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to hear from it.
I'll share. I'm a number 2 right now, and being resentful. So there you go. I'm just being vulnerable to you guys.
We got Mike on full vulnerability right
There
now.
you go.
We should probably pester him with a bunch of questions. Well, if you're a father, consider the behaviors that we go through and that we instill in our children, just non-negotiables. Understand what those are for your family. What are those values that you want to instill with them? But you also have to remember that if you want to instill those, you also have to be doing them too. So as we wrap up today, I kind of want to leave everybody with this, we actually talked about this at Students Tonight and the influence that our parents have on us. And so there's a book called Handing Down the Faith. I have not read it, but it was recommended to me, Cole, and Spencer as we were at Hope Students Tonight. And it's talking about how parents hand down the faith to our kiddos. And, the one big thing that's in there is parents are the number one influence in passing down their faith to their kids. And it's not just a mom, and it's not just a dad. And so if your wife's out there crushing it with the faith, and dads, you're not doing that, there's a lot of stats that actually back that up. Guys, it's time to kick it into gear. It's time to meet your wife where she's at too. That's a partnership, and you guys got to lead your family together as you're doing that. But I know we've talked about this a lot of walking out our walk, but one of the points they make in this book that the student pastor talked about tonight was walking the walk is great, but you also have to talk with your kids about their walk, what it means, why it matters, and why you care about it. And so think about that as we wrap up tonight. And remember that all of us clearly are not perfect fathers. You will never be a perfect father, but we just need to be intentional about how we lead our families and lead our kiddos in their faith walk too. We also want to hear from you. If there's any topics that you want us to discuss, you can reach out to us on Instagram at Fishing for Men Podcast, or you can shoot us an email at fishingformenpodcasts@outlook.com. We pray that you come alongside us in the journey of discipleship to Jesus. Stay tuned. The stories are still being written.